This chapter is super boring for several pages.
It is. I mean, it's like, and they ran some more.
And they ran.
Like, should we run some more or should we rest? I don't know. Like, why don't you rest? But
ponder.
Yeah, rest. Here's the thing. Like, this is where you realize that Legolas with Lembas and some fresh air doesn't need to sleep, right?
Right.
So why did anybody ever have to guard anything? You know what I'm saying? Like, Legolas should have just been like, "Oh, hey, I'm going to stay up and everyone sleep."
Yeah, it seems kind of cruel to make like, "Oh, Sam, why don't you stay up and guard things because Legolas needs to sleep."
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It's like Legolas doesn't need to sleep. It's like, why don't you just Legolas should always just be on guard.
Yeah, Legolas should just be like, "Yeah, okay, you guys, you
guys sleep. Like, I don't need to."
It's got to be the equivalent, the Elvish equivalent of like 10 hours has to be like the Elvish equivalent of like 30 seconds. Like, okay,
right.
let's go.
Right.
So,
or like going underwater with I don't know, like a whale that could stay underwater for 6 hours.
Yeah.
And you're like, "Can we stop and go up for air, please?" And the whale's like, "Why did I bring you along?"
Yeah. Amateurs.
But I don't even know if a whale can stay under for that long. I'm just making things up. But seriously though, like I said, it's boring, but I mean, I don't mean that for me.
No,
I think it would be boring for a normal like person who's looking for like jump scares and fights.
Should you say like
page.
Uneventful?
It's uneventful, but I like that, and I think it is very Tolkien-esque because some people like that kind of slow, experiential, almost what's a big fancy word that I can throw down here? Like a phenomenon. Okay. It's a phenomenological approach. Like it's just an experience. Here you are experiencing the landscape. And and again, it's like it's not particularly exciting, but if it weren't for these moments that are just running through a landscape, the Lord of the Rings wouldn't feel as real as it does. Because what happens in a real adventure, there's times where actually not a whole lot's going on and you just have to grudgingly go through the landscape. You know what I mean?
I think most things are like waiting for hours and then 10 minutes of like actual combat.
Yeah. Like if you're going to go bungee jumping or something, it takes like hours to climb up to the cliff.
Yeah.
And like 30 seconds of fun.
It's like zip line.
30 seconds of non-fun.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to die. I'm a guy who likes the Silmarillion, so I have a very high threshold of patience. And the other thing is, like, there are 0 hobbits in this chapter. For those who like kind of found Tolkien through The Hobbit and then Lord of the Rings Fellowship, this is your first chapter that is hobbitless. Your first large chapter that is hobbitless.
Yeah.
Departure of Boromir being kind of a pseudo chapter.
Well, but and again, this is like we've talked about this earlier before we get into like the actual meat of the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it was hard when I was a kid to get through these chapters because there were no hobbits.
Right.
That's what I like. Little people eating each other.
Little things hitting each other.
I'm sorry. I love that. Oh,
No, but seriously though,
I feel bad for kids these days that don't know the glories of Time Bandits.
Yeah, I know. My kids know the glory of Time Bandits. It was one of my favorite scenes of Time Bandits was when they first meet the Time Bandits, when they're in Kevin's room.
Yeah.
And he shines a flashlight on them, and they like Wally shoots a gun in the air and like they just like just shit their pants and they just start running around. That is like one of the greatest like reaction scenes ever. And my kid just laughed his ass off for that. So anyway,
that's hilarious.
And where that scene ties into the Lord of the Rings, Ian Holm was Napoleon and Ian Holm was Bilbo.
That's right.
Yeah,
he's in both movies. Forgot about that. When Aragorn meets Éomer here, it suddenly opens up like a bunch of things that point into the past and into the future, and like all these different kind of issues that Tolkien is able to reintroduce into the story.
Yeah.
So like the idea that that Éomer already knows who Gandalf is, and that there's a history where Gandalf, takes Shadowfax, and so he knows that story, the Gandalf story, and Éomer's also aware of the Boromir story. That Boromir heard the poem about, seek for the sword that was broken and Imladris it dwells, and then knows about the quest up to Rivendell. And it becomes like, oh, okay, all these issues are still important. Like, where's Gandalf? Where's Boromir? They're both dead.
Well, as far as Boromir for sure, but Gandalf,
right. As far I'm saying, as far as they know, obviously.
But they also Éomer had heard of halflings as well. They're like, oh, it's
right. Well, they're in the poem.
Yeah, and the fact that Aragorn actually openly declares himself as basically the king of God, the king of the land, or whatever.
But actually, I thought that was really, I thought that was an interesting moment, kind of almost out of character, obviously for Aragorn to this point.
Yeah, that's like kind of like do you know who I am? You don't know who I am.
Right. You don't know who I am. You're trying to give me a ticket. I'm the mayor's son.
Yeah, I need give me your horse. Do you know who I am? You know who my dad is?
You're gonna be in so much trouble.
Oh, you're gonna regret this, buddy.
So let me set this up real quick. And this is a scene that Jackson does, and so it's kind of maybe overplayed and overemphasized. But it is an interesting moment where, Gimli plants his feet firmly apart, and then Éomer, of course, gives the famous, "I would cut off your head, beard and all, Master Dwarf, if it stood but a little higher from the ground."
Right.
So,
like not only insulting and implying that Gimli needs a haircut, he's also making fun of his height. That's heightism.
That's totally heightism. So he's racist against dwarves, and then
obviously,
and then Legolas jumps in and puts his, bends his bow. And so it was like a dick measuring contest or something.
Yeah. It's like
a dick measuring contest.
Yeah, swinging dicks here.
Yeah, and I'm like, dude, someone needs to like tamp this down. And then Aragorn is like,
check this out, folks.
So Aragorn sprang between them and raised his hand. Your pardon, Éomer. He's like apologizing. It's just weird because.
Keep like, but Aragorn springs between them. It's like, check out my fellas.
My point is that he first tries to make peace. He's like, your pardon, Éomer. Like, please don't kill each other over this, brief and inconsequential misunderstanding about the Lady of Lorien or whatever, right? So you think he's like all trying to like chill things out, cool things down. And then all of a sudden, he's like,
look at this sword, fellers.
Look at my sword. So, okay, so, he calmed it down between Gimli and Legolas and Éomer, right? And then you think everything's chill, and then Aragorn threw back his cloak. The elven sheath glittered, blah, blah, blah. Anduril shone like a sudden flame as he whipped it out. As he swept it out. Elendil, he cried, I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn. I am called Elisar, the Elfstone, Dunedain, heir of Isildur, Elendil's son of Gondor, blah, blah, blah. His big, mighty lineage. Here's a sword that was broken and forged again. Will you aid me or thwart me? Choose swiftly. It's like a threat.
Yeah, I know.
I'm like, didn't you just didn't you just calm down this like hostility between these other guys, and now you just double down?
It was a trick. He like calmed it down, and then he amped it up to like 100. You want to get nuts? I am Elendil, brother.
Anyway, so Gimli and Legolas looked at their companion in amazement, and they're like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, they're like, yeah, they're probably like, what? They're like, hey, we're not with this guy.
Right. We're not. Who's this guy? Eomer goes through like, oh well, Sauron wanted to get horses from us, buy horses from us, and they refused to give them horses because Sauron doesn't treat the horses very well.
Right.
And of course, the Rohirrim really like their horses, and they see them as kindred in a sense, so they wouldn't just sell just any random abuser of animals like these horses. So Sauron's like, okay, then I'll just have my guys steal your horses.
Yeah. I know we tried to do this the right way, but it didn't matter. Like buying the horses was just a way for him to curry favor with Rohan. I think it's kind
well, he
like,
probably did want horses.
Oh, I know he did want horses, but I don't think he gave a shit how he got
especially
them.
Black horses.
Yeah, I think what he like the whole like trying to buy horses was like Sauron's way of hey, I'm a cool guy. I'm going to give you money for your horses. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And not,
right.
You know, and not like, so, yeah.
So
just
like, establish, you establish trading with another nation, and then you get in their good favors, and then you can start to corrupt them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was like, all right, well, if they're not going to play ball, we're just going to take the horses. It doesn't matter. We're going to get these horses one way or another. We just would like these.
Right. But then it does. He does say that Saruman has been very hostile towards Rohan too, and is basically cutting them off, and until the point where Eomer feels like they're fighting basically a two-front war, even though they're not like officially at war.
Saruman's running roughshod over the whole over Rohan because he can, because there's no consequences right now. You know?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, can you just reading this little chapter, I started getting weird vibes. I don't know if we necessarily want to go here, but like it's so prescient and reminiscent of like today with like kind of the corrupt political class, and just like, oh, there's like someone whispering, you wonder who your real leaders are because there's someone whispering like evilness into someone's ear and making them have allegiances with like foreign powers, basically like, oh, let's do Sauron's bid. Let's do Saruman's bidding instead of the will of the people of Rohan or something.
Right, you know what I mean? Right. But here's the thing, like, yeah, you could draw the parallel between this and.
Dude, Tolkien was like a prophet. He was writing about the 21st century.
But he could also draw this parallel to world, like to the world back then too. You know what I'm saying? Right.
Yeah. So it says, but at this time our chief concern is with Saruman. So that's second paragraph. He has claimed lordship over all this land, and there has been war between us for many months. He has taken orcs into his service and wolf riders and evil men, and he has closed the gap against us so that we are likely to be beset by both east and west. It is ill dealing with such a foe. He is a wizard, both cunning and dwemer crafty. Ooh, I never even noticed that word before. Dwemer crafty, having many guises. He walks here and there, they say, as an old man, hooded and cloaked, very like to Gandalf, as many now recall. His spies slip through every net, and his birds of ill omen are abroad in the sky. It makes it seem like Saruman is trying to be like a mini Sauron, or trying to follow in the footsteps of Sauron, making these orcs, breeding these orcs, having spies in the sky, kind of like the Nazgul or whatever.
Do you think that he was actually a mini Sauron, or was he trying to, like, in Saruman's mind, do you think he he felt like, oh yeah, I could take Sauron, no problem. You know what I'm saying? I could take him out. Yeah, you know,
I think for Tolkien, this is my assumption, is that anytime Tolkien depicts a Dark Lord type figure submitting or succumbing to evil, the means by which he wields power is through like breeding orcs. And that's like an orc in Tolkien's world, I think, is like a formerly free person who had agency and a will and could do their own thing. But an orc is just like, in Tolkien's world, is bred to be subservient to the master.
Yeah.
And to follow the will of the master. And that's how a Dark Lord will gain power, is through, how many orcs did you breed? And how many orcs are in your service doing your will and spreading your power over the land? And so Morgoth bred orcs, and, Sauron bred orcs, and Saruman.
Hey, who do you think had the best orcs?
Actually, Saruman had the best orcs, didn't he?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, like he bred the Uruk-hai, and yeah, they were almost as tall as men. That's like the one thing, and I keep coming back to this, and we keep talking about this. But the one thing I absolutely wish is that people, like in the Lord of the Rings, that Jackson didn't make the orcs so, like, they could have been evil and slimy, but not so massive and hulky, except for the Uruk-hai. But they were, like, the orcs were never taller than men, like, generally.
Right.
You know, they weren't like these hulking beasts, because, I mean, not to jump too far ahead, but when Frodo and Sam are walking through Mordor disguised as orcs, I mean, like the height discrepancy might had to have been massive. You know what I'm saying? Like in Jackson's movie, but really, like, orcs were about like the goblins were about that high. They weren't huge.
Well, I always pictured the goblins in The Hobbit, like in Goblin Town, those goblins, as being fairly small, like kind of puny and.
Well, I mean,
wiry and because they had to be underground. I mean, you're not gonna have this hulking beast of a creature underground, except for maybe the Goblin King.
But even when you hear Tolkien describe the Uruk-hai, it's like they were almost as tall as men. They were almost as tall as men. They were never so they were way more formidable, but they still weren't,
Which is weird because, orcs are bred from the original, like, material of an orc is elves and possibly men, like elves and men, firstborn, that were tortured and made into orcs. So there must have been a smallening process that happened.
Yeah,
it's like you put them in the dryer and they shrink.
But maybe they distilled all the good out of the elves, and like what there was left was
smaller.
Orc.
Yeah, you suck them dry.
And Lord of the Rings.
Remember Shrinky Dinks?
Yeah, so orcs portrayed in the Lord of the Rings films as having heights between 4 and 5 feet. So they were not tall. The Uruk-hai were probably about 6 feet, bigger than, but between 4 and 5 feet. So like a hobbit, while shorter than an orc, would not be completely out of place.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, on the average, and like that's neither here nor there, because there's no orcs. Maybe that's what's wrong with this chapter. No orcs, chasing orcs. Like we haven't seen and the thing is, like, it has really, what I think, again, it's like all exposition. Maybe what we're kind of like looking at here is like it's setting up the book. It's setting up the rest of the book. These 2 chapters.
No, it totally is. Plus, it's by far the longest conversation that we get between 2 men in Lord of the Rings thus far.
Yeah.
And it's boring. No, I'm just kidding.
It's not boring.